Your child's future shouldn't be your unfinished dream. Let them be a person, not a project. One day, your child may look successful on the outside, a good salary, a respectable title, a life that looks impressive on paper, and still feel empty. Not because they failed, but because they lived someone else's dream. If you're a parent, or if you ever plan to be one, this message matters more than you think. Because what you encourage, what you discourage, and what you quietly expect can shape the rest of a human being's life. Most parents don't mean to harm their children. They love them deeply. They worry constantly. They stay awake at night thinking about their future. They want safety. They want stability. They want their child to avoid the pain they themselves experienced. So they choose a path for them. Doctor, engineer, lawyer, something secure, something socially respected, something that sounds good when asked, "What does your child do?" And on the surface, this looks like love. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Forcing a specific career path on your child may protect your fear, not their future. And the psychological cost often doesn't show up right away. It shows up quietly, years later, when the applause fades, when the routine becomes heavy, when they wake up one morning and realize they've been living on autopilot. Let's be honest about why this happens. It's rarely about the child's true potential. It's about anxiety, fear of financial insecurity, fear of judgment from relatives and society, fear that freedom will lead to failure, fear that passion won't pay the bills, fear that following your heart means ending up lost. So control feels like love, structure feels responsible, certainty feels safe. But psychologically, control sends a very different message. It says, "I don't trust you to know yourself. I don't trust you to make good decisions. I don't trust the world to support you. I don't trust uncertainty." Children feel this message even when it's never spoken out loud. They feel it in tone, in pressure, in disappointment disguised as concern. There's a key psychological principle every parent should understand. Human beings are wired for autonomy. This is not philosophy, it's biology. When people feel they chose something freely, motivation rises. When they feel forced, resistance grows. Not always openly, not always immediately. Sometimes resistance turns inward, into numbness, into anxiety, into quiet resentment. A child who chooses their direction develops internal motivation. A child who is pushed develops compliance or resentment, sometimes both. And compliance can look like success for a long time, until it collapses. Here's what forced career paths often create, slowly and quietly: chronic self-doubt, fear of disappointing others, emotional numbness, anxiety around decision-making, difficulty knowing what they actually want, a weak or fragmented sense of identity. The child learns early that approval comes from performance, not authenticity, that love must be earned. So they stop asking, "What do I enjoy? What excites me? What feels meaningful?" And they start asking, "What will keep me accepted? What will keep them proud? What will keep me safe?" That question doesn't disappear when childhood ends. It follows them into adulthood, into relationships, into careers, into every major life decision. Imagine a child who loves drawing. They draw constantly, on notebooks, on scraps of paper, on the margins of homework. They lose track of time. They feel alive when they create. But they're told again and again, "That's just a hobby. You can do that in your free time. That's not a real career." So they stop sharing their sketches. They stop talking about what excites them. They learn to be practical. They choose something smart. Years later, they can't remember the last time they felt that spark. Not because they were lazy, not because they lacked discipline, but because it was trained out of them. Parents often believe certain careers guarantee stability,
But the world doesn't work that way anymore. Industries change, technology evolves, jobs disappear, burnout increases. Even traditionally respected professions are filled with people who feel trapped, exhausted, and emotionally disconnected. What actually sustains a person long-term isn't the job title. It's adaptability, curiosity, problem-solving ability, emotional resilience, a sense of purpose. Those traits don't come from force. They come from freedom supported by guidance. This distinction matters more than most parents realize. Guidance says, let's explore your strengths. Let's look at real-world skills. Let's talk about how to support yourself. Let's prepare you for challenges. Control says, this is the path. This is non-negotiable. This is who you must become. One builds confidence, the other builds fear. Your child doesn't need you to decide their life for them. They need you to help them understand themselves. You've seen this person. Maybe you are this person. They followed the rules. They listened. They met expectations. They checked every box. Good grades, good job, good reputation. And yet, in private, they feel lost. They ask themselves, why am I unhappy when I did everything I was supposed to? That question is painful, because answering it honestly threatens everything they built their identity around. So many people keep going, not because they're fulfilled, but because stopping feels terrifying. Fear-based parenting teaches children one thing above all else, that mistakes are dangerous. So they become risk-averse. They avoid exploration. They avoid experimentation. They avoid trusting themselves. But growth requires mistakes. Confidence comes from surviving failure, not avoiding it. When parents remove all uncertainty, they also remove resilience. And resilience is what actually prepares someone for life. There's a common myth that passion and responsibility are opposites. They're not. Passion doesn't mean recklessness. It doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means engagement. A child who cares deeply about something will work harder. They'll learn faster. They'll persist longer when things get difficult. That doesn't guarantee success, but neither does force. Psychology is very clear on this. People thrive when motivation comes from within. Not praise, not pressure, not fear of punishment or disappointment, but internal meaning. When children feel ownership over their choices, they develop stronger problem-solving skills, higher emotional intelligence, greater creativity, better stress management, higher long-term life satisfaction. You cannot install that from the outside. You can only create the conditions for it to grow. They need safety, not the safety of control, but the safety of being allowed to explore without losing love. They need to know you're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to grow at your own pace. You're allowed to be different from me. That safety becomes their inner voice as adults, and that inner voice determines how they treat themselves when life gets hard. This is the question many parents fear most, and the honest answer is simple. They will choose wrong sometimes. Everyone does. The goal of parenting isn't to prevent wrong choices. It's to raise someone who can recover from them. A child who never chose cannot adapt. A child who chose, failed, reflected, and tried again learns strength. Many people don't rebel immediately. They comply. They succeed. They make their parents proud. And then, in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, something breaks. Burnout, depression, anxiety, a sudden sense of meaninglessness, an identity crisis they can't explain, because the cost of living unaligned eventually demands payment. When you trust your child, you teach them to trust themselves. That's not naive, that's preparation. A child who trusts themselves doesn't make reckless decisions. They make thoughtful ones, because they're not driven by fear, they're driven by understanding. Healthy support sounds like, tell me what interests you, what makes you feel energized. Let's explore options together. Here's what I've learned from experience, but the choice is yours. This doesn't mean unlimited freedom. It means shared responsibility. It means being present without being controlling. When success is forced, children learn a dangerous belief: I am loved for what I produce. That belief is heavy. It creates perfectionism. It creates anxiety. It creates fear of rest. It creates relationships built on performance, and it follows them everywhere. Ask yourself honestly, is the path you want for your child really about their future or about easing your own fear? This question isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to free you both. Your child will live with their choices every day. You will not. That reality matters.
Temporary discomfort now is far better than lifelong regret later. Your job as a parent isn't to decide who your child becomes. It's to help them discover it safely, to walk beside them, not ahead of them, not on top of them. When children are trusted, they grow stronger than fear. And one day, if they look back on their life with peace instead of regret, that will be the real success. If this message made you pause, share it with someone who needs it. Not to argue, not to convince, not to prove a point, but to plant a seed. Sometimes that's enough to change a life.